land of Britain once existed only in the imagination of the mighty Roman Empire. To them, Britannia was a hazy legend, a place of mist-veiled forests and fierce tribes. In 55 BCE, Julius Caesar led his army across the English Channel and set foot on that unfamiliar sandy shore. Yet his two expeditions ended swiftly, leaving behind more tales and victories. Nearly a century later, under Emperor Claudius, the dream of Britannia became reality. Roman legions advanced deep into the island. Londinium was established as a new center, and stone-paved roads linked forts and settlements. The Romans brought with them law, architecture, and their pantheon of gods, sowing the seeds of an order never before known in this wild land. But that was only the beginning. What awaited this misty island after the footsteps of the Romans? To understand the transformation into a powerful kingdom, we must trace the journey back to its earliest dawn, where ancient stone circles still stand silent against time. If you were to stand today upon the white cliffs of Dover and look out to sea, it would be hard to imagine that hundreds of thousands of years ago, this place was not a separate island. During the Ice Age, fluctuating sea levels revealed a land bridge known as Doggerland, connecting Britain to mainland Europe. It was through this natural land corridor that the first humans arrived on the island. Around 800,000 years ago, groups of Homo heidelbergensis, roaming after herds of large animals, left behind traces in Norfolk. Crude stone tools pointed implements and hand axes. Meanwhile in Kent, archaeologists have found fossilized bones and evidence of hunting mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and bison, giant creatures that once ruled the frozen plains. This is proof of a simple truth, that Britain has been a land visited by humans since the most ancient of times. As the last ice age melted away around 10,000 years ago, the landscape transformed. Dense forests replaced the ice, and rivers and freshwater lakes became ideal places to settle. This was the Mesolithic period, the Middle Stone Age. Communities of hunter-gatherers built seasonal camps along rivers and lakes, where there was fish, fresh water, and accessible routes. The Star Car site in Yorkshire offers a vivid picture of life in this era. Wooden floors of dwellings, butchered animal bones, and headdresses made from the skulls of giant deer, likely used in ritual ceremonies. The Mesolithic people were remarkable adapters. They crafted microliths, tiny stone tools, affixed a wooden shaft to create arrows, spears, and fish hooks. The invention of the bow and arrow completely transformed hunting. Now they could bring down agile prey deep in the forest. They also built dugout canoes, cast nets, and expanded their food sources from rivers, lakes, and the sea. Though still nomadic, their lives have become more connected than ever before. They shared food, buried their dead with ceremony, and perhaps had already begun to nurture primitive beliefs about the soul. Around 4000 BCE, a true revolution unfolded, the Neolithic Age. From the continent, people brought with them seeds of wheat and barley, along with herds of sheep, cattle, and pigs. They began to farm and raise livestock, no longer relying solely on hunting. Longhouses made of wood, clay, and thatch appeared, gathering into stable villages near rivers and lakes, surrounded by fields and grazing land. With agriculture, humans bound their fate to the soil, marking the beginning of permanent, settled society. What makes the Neolithic people of Britain especially remarkable is that they left behind monumental megalithic structures, legacies that endure to this day. Between 300 and 2000 BCE, Stonehenge was erected, a massive stone circle aligned precisely with the summer and winter solstices. It was not only a ceremonial center, but also an astronomical monument that reflected the astonishing knowledge of ancient inhabitants. Not far from there lies Avebury, an even wider stone circle, surrounded by a gigantic ditch. In Wiltshire, Silbury Hill, a man-made mound nearly 40 meters high, the largest prehistoric earthwork in Europe, remains a mystery yet to be solved. Alongside these were countless barrows, burial mounds for communal interment, revealing a belief in the afterlife. This was the age of collective culture. These colossal structures required the labor of hundreds, even thousands of people, indicating that society had developed organization, leadership, and a powerful religious faith. The Neolithic people worshipped the sun, the moon, and lived in a world where nature and divinity were inseparable. Around 2500 BCE, a wave of transformation swept across the British Isles. Humans had learned to master fire in a new way. They melted copper ore and alloyed it with tin to create a gleaming, much harder and more durable metal than stone. From this came bronze axes, spearheads, and daggers, sharp and resilient tools that not only revolutionized how people hunted and cultivated the land, but also became symbols of status and power. The arrival of metal brought about profound social changes. Where once Neolithic communities had been relatively egalitarian, now clear social stratification began to emerge. Those who controlled the tin mines of Cornwall, the copper mines of Wales, or dominated trade routes swiftly rose as chieftains and nobles. Beneath them stood the warriors, men bearing polished bronze weapons, and merchants who carried tin from Britain in exchange, or gold from Ireland, amber from the Baltic, and wine and pottery from continental Europe. During this period, the clearest archaeological footprint is left by the Wessex culture in southern England. Rich burial sites have been unearthed, filled with gold ornaments, amber, ivory, and intricately crafted bronze weaponry, evidence of an elite class that held both political authority and religious significance. Some theories suggest that it was this Wessex aristocracy that orchestrated and oversaw the construction and final stages of massive monuments like Stonehenge during this era. Alongside the lavish burial sites, ceremonial monuments continue to be erected. New stone circles, timber temples, and structures aligned with celestial bodies demonstrate that Bronze Age people still live in a world where faith and nature were deeply intertwined. They observed the movements of sun and moon, held sacrificial rites to ensure good harvests, and viewed these monumental constructions as bridges between mortals and the divine. Toward the end of this period, another major development occurred. Early Celtic groups from the continent began to migrate to Britain. They brought with them their languages, customs, and spiritual beliefs, gradually blending with the native inhabitants. It was from this cultural fusion that the earliest roots of Celtic identity, which would become the bedrock of local culture for centuries to come, first began to take hold. The Bronze Age in Britain, therefore, was not only an era of gleaming tools and weapons, but a critical turning point in social evolution. A world of power, trade, ritual, and emerging local identity was taking shape, preparing for a dramatic new chapter as the Celtics expanded and the Iron Age dawned. When the first iron swords gleamed across Britain in the 8th century BC, an entirely new era began, the Iron Age. Across the island, new communities emerged, shaped by the mingling of native populations and migrating Celtic tribes from the continent. The Romans would later refer to these people collectively as the Britons, while in the north they encountered the Picts, noted for their intricate tattoos and fierce tactics, and Ireland, the Gaels, who brought distinct languages and traditions. Despite regional differences, they all shared in the vibrant Celtic culture, languages, customs, and a polytheistic religion deeply rooted in the natural world. Celtic society was not a unified kingdom, but a network of tribes. The Aes Sedai in the east, later made famous by Queen Boudica, the Trinovans around the Thames, the Brigantes across the north, and the Ordovices in Wales. Each tribe was led by a chieftain, surrounded by a class of powerful warriors. This was a society that revered the warrior ethos: long swords, round iron-rimmed shields, sharp spears, and chariots racing across open fields. Before battle, warriors sometimes cast off their armor, fighting naked and dyed blue or woad, transforming their bodies into living phantoms designed to terrify the enemy. Honor and victory in combat were the only true measures of power. A great chieftain was a conquering chieftain. At the heart of each community stood the hill fort, fortresses built on high ground, surrounded by deep ditches and earth ramparts. They served not only as defensive strongholds, but as political and economic centers. The most impressive example is Maiden Castle in Dorset, a complex of multiple concentric ramparts that ripple like waves across the hillside, capable of housing a bustling population. Within the fort, people lived in roundhouses with thatched roofs, surrounded by farmlands, livestock pens, and workshops. Iron Age economy was based on agriculture and animal husbandry. The Britons grew wheat, barley, and oats. They raised cattle, sheep, and pigs for meat, milk, wool, and hides. Some tribes even brewed barley into a crude form of beer for communal feasts. Craftsmanship also advanced, especially in ironworking, yielding agricultural tools like plows and sickles, which helped boost productivity. They were part of a vast trade network, exchanging iron, salt, furs, and horses with the continent in return for wine, pottery, and luxury goods from France and the Mediterranean. The spiritual life of the Celtic peoples was governed by a rich polytheistic religion. They worshipped the sun, the moon, revered rivers, mountains, springs, and especially the oak tree, considered sacred. At the head of this religious world stood the Druids, figures who acted simultaneously as priests, judges, and scholars. Though they left behind no written records, they wielded immense influence, settling disputes, performing rituals, interpreting omens, and preserving historical memory through oral tradition. According to some accounts by Julius Caesar, the Celts at times performed animal and even human sacrifices, believing that blood offerings would appease the wrath of the gods. These ceremonies often took place in oak groves, springs, or lakes, where nature itself became a sacred temple. In 55 and 54 BC, the island of Britain first came face to face with Rome as Julius Caesar crossed the English Channel. His writings gave later generations a vivid image of the Britons. Warriors with thick beards, hair bleached and spiked with lime like a horse's mane, riding war chariots at breakneck speed. Their bodies dyed in blue woad. Caesar described them as fierce but barbaric, difficult to subdue, yet capable of forming alliances when necessary. His 2 campaigns gained only minor victories, and he was eventually forced to withdraw, leaving behind only a surface-level influence without turning Britannia into a Roman province. Yet that encounter served as a kind of prophecy. The island did not yet belong to Rome, but the day the empire returned was inevitable, and when it did, the fate of the Britons would be changed forever. In 43 CE, Emperor Claudius, a ruler once dismissed as weak and indecisive, sought to prove his authority through a resounding military triumph, the conquest of Britannia. This was a land that had forced Julius Caesar to retreat nearly a century earlier, and now presented the perfect stage for Claudius to secure his place in history. He dispatched 4 legions, totaling around 40,000 troops, to cross the English Channel. They quickly clashed with the powerful Cativalani tribe, but faced with Rome's iron discipline, the Celtic warriors were forced to submit. Claudius himself stepped ashore, leading war elephants into a strange new land, and declared the founding of the province of Britannia, forever tying the fate of the island to the greatest empire of its age. However, Roman domination would not go unchallenged. In 60 to 61 CE, the entire province was shaken by the uprising of Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe. After her husband's death, the Romans attempted to seize tribal lands, flogged Boudica, and humiliated her daughters. Her fury became the spark for war. Tens of thousands of Celtic warriors rose up, torching Colchester, Londinium, and Verulamium, and slaughtering tens of thousands of Roman citizens and collaborators. Roman historians describe horrific scenes. Men killed on the spot, women executed in savage rituals, and entire cities consumed in flames. Ultimately, Roman forces under Suetonius Paulinus regrouped and crushed Boudica's army in a decisive battle. Legend says she took poison rather than fall into enemy hands. The rebellion failed, and from that point on, no tribal force would again threaten Roman control in Britannia. Once the revolt had been quashed, the Romans began transforming Britannia into a fully integrated part of the empire. Londinium, once a minor military camp, grew into the island's busiest commercial center. 69. Aquae Sulis Bath became famed for its hot springs, combining Roman engineering with local reverence to the goddess Sulis. Verulamium, St. Albans, emerged as a vibrant cultural hub, a network of stone-paved roads stretching for thousands of kilometers, linked cities, forts, and ports, some of which remain visible today. Villas with intricate mosaics, public bathhouses, temples, and amphitheaters transformed the landscape, giving the island a Romanized appearance. Gods like Jupiter, Mars, and Minerva appear across the land, yet they didn't fully replace native deities. Instead, a fusion occurred. Minerva merged with Sulis at Bath, Jupiter with Nodens, a testament to Rome's adaptive approach to conquest. Under Roman rule, Britannia's economy flourished. Grain fields fed the legions and exported surplus to Rome. Mines yielded tin, lead, silver, and iron, all of strategic importance. Merchants bustled between lands. Britannia exported metals, furs, and slaves, and imported wine, olive oil, and fine pottery from the continent. Yet not all regions submitted. In the north, the fierce Caledonian tribes, ancestors of modern Scots, persistently resisted Roman control. To contain them, in 122 CE, Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of a monumental barrier, Hadrian's Wall, stretching 117 kilometers from coast to coast, rising 5 meters high and studded with forts and watchtowers. The wall served both as a military fortification and a declaration of imperial might, the edge of Rome's civilized world. Later, a second wall, the Antonine Wall, was built farther north, but proved too difficult to defend and was eventually abandoned. Hadrian's Wall, however, endured as the enduring symbol of Roman Britain, dividing the island between the Romanized south and the untamed north. Britannia's society gradually transformed. The native Britons still plowed their fields, but now with Roman iron plows and new crops like grapes and olives introduced from the continent. A portion of the tribal aristocracy embraced Romanization, wearing togas, speaking Latin, and taking part in city councils. Turning from former enemies into collaborators of Rome, spiritual life evolved as well. Christianity, which at first existed quietly within small communities, began spreading more widely during the 3rd and 4th centuries. When Rome formally embraced the faith, small churches also began to rise in Britannia, signaling a profound religious transformation. Yet this golden age was not to last. From the 3rd century, the Roman Empire began to fracture, stretched thin by waves of invasions from Germanic tribes, Goths, and Huns. Far-flung Britannia, on the empire's western fringe, was gradually neglected. Legions were repeatedly withdrawn to defend Rome itself, weakening the island's defenses. The native population was left to fend off Saxon pirates from the east, Pictish raiders from the north, and Scots sailing from Ireland. Finally, in 410 CE, Emperor Honorius sent a fateful letter to the cities of Britannia, ordering them to look to their own defense. It was an official abandonment. The Roman army withdrew and would never return. Roads and cities began to decay. The tribal aristocracy lost their imperial patronage, and the island descended into a power vacuum. That vacuum did not remain unfilled for long. From across the North Sea, Anglo-Saxon tribes prepared to land, ushering in a new and turbulent era, the early medieval period of England. In 410 CE, the final Roman legions left Britannia, for centuries of imperial rule came to an end, leaving behind stone-paved roads, fortifications, and a Roman urban network that would soon fall into decay. The Britons, now abandoned, faced relentless threats. Pictish tribes from the north, Scots from Ireland, and Saxon raiders from the sea. With no protection from the once mighty empire, the island fell into a state of lawlessness and fragmentation. In the midst of this chaos, a single triumphant battle lit a spark of hope. The Battle of Mons Badonicus, around 500 CE. Historical records are vague, but legend tells of a powerful war leader, possibly the figure who inspired the myth of King Arthur, who led the Britons to a stunning victory against the Anglo-Saxons, halting their advance for several decades. Though scholars debate the historical accuracy, the story became an integral part of the British national memory. Yet the waves of migration from northern Europe did not cease. From the 5th to the 6th centuries, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes crossed the sea, landing on the eastern and southern shores of Britain. They did not come merely to raid, but to settle, bringing with them families, livestock, and tools, turning these foreign lands into their new home. The native Britons were gradually pushed westward into Cornwall, Wales, and Scotland, while most fertile regions fell into the hands of the newcomers. An Anglo-Saxon society began to take shape. Initially scattered into small tribal communities, over time they organized into larger political units. The Heptarchy, 7 kingdoms including Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, East Anglia, Kent, Essex, and Sussex. Each was ruled by a signing king, supported by a warrior aristocracy known as thanes, free peasants or ceorls, and a lower class of slaves, often the remnants of war. In Anglo-Saxon villages, thatched wooden houses clustered around a central hearth, surrounded by farmlands. Life revolved around agriculture and warfare. It was a military agrarian society, with a reputation of a king or chieftain dependent on his ability to defend his land and deliver spoils of war. Their early belief system was rooted in Germanic paganism, worshipping Odin, Thor, and Frigg, gods of war, thunder, and fate. But in 597 CE, a major turning point occurred. Pope Gregory I sent the missionary St. Augustine to the Kingdom of Kent. He succeeded in converting King Ethelbert to Christianity. From Kent, the new faith spread gradually throughout the Heptarchy. At the Synod of Whitby in 664, the Anglo-Saxons chose to follow Roman Christianity over the Celtic tradition, a decision that bound England's spiritual destiny to continental Europe. Christianity brought Latin script, leading to the establishment of monasteries, centers of worship, learning, and the preservation of knowledge. Anglo-Saxon culture, once passed down orally, now had writing, law codes, and historical chronicles. A towering figure of this era was Bede, 673 to 735, a monk and historian whose ecclesiastical history of the English people laid the foundation for recorded English history. In the late 8th century, from the icy waters of Scandinavia, Viking longships began appearing on the shores of Britain. In 793, the monastery at Lindisfarne, a beacon of religion and learning, was attacked. Monks were slaughtered, manuscripts looted, and treasures plundered. That shocking event was recorded in the annals as the beginning of the Viking Age in England. In the following decades, wealthy monasteries and coastal towns remained frequent targets. But the Vikings were not only raiders, they became settlers. In the east and north, they established the Danelaw, a semi-independent territory governed by Scandinavian law and custom. Its greatest urban center was York, known to the Vikings as Jorvik, which flourished into a bustling trade hub where Anglo-Saxons and Vikings coexisted. The Viking presence left a lasting imprint. Old Norse words seeped into the English language. Terms like sky, egg, and law are enduring legacies. Viking art, silver jewelry, dragon motifs, interlocking knotwork, merged with Anglo-Saxon styles, influencing wood carving, weapon design, and even folklore and myth. Still, conflict was inevitable. In the 9th century, Viking armies overran much of Anglo-Saxon England. Yet in the southwest, the Kingdom of Wessex rose in defiance under the leadership of Alfred the Great, 871 to 899. Alfred reformed the military, established a network of fortified towns called Buzz, built a fleet of small warships to challenge Viking longboats, and simultaneously promoted Christianity and education. Thanks to Alfred, Wessex endured and became the core of Anglo-Saxon resistance and recovery. It is no accident that posterity remembers him as the father of the English nation. After centuries of division and conflict between Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, the balance finally tipped in Wessex's favor. By 927, Alfred's grandson, Athelstan, defeated rival rulers and became the first king to rule over all of England. Athelstan was more than a warrior. He was a legislator and diplomat, issuing unified laws, strengthening the church, supporting monasteries, and expanding trade with continental Europe. With him, England as a singular nation was born, no longer a patchwork of rival kingdoms, but a unified realm under one crown. However, England's trials were far from over. In the 11th century, the kingdom once again fell into the hands of Norse invaders. In 1016, King Nut the Great of Denmark conquered England and established the North Sea Empire, comprising England, Denmark, and Norway. Under Nut, England enjoyed a period of relative stability, but after his death in 1035, the empire quickly disintegrated. In 1042, the English throne returned to the Anglo-Saxon dynasty with Edward the Confessor, a deeply pious man. Edward reigned for over 2 decades and famously commissioned construction of Westminster Abbey. Yet his devotion to religion was paired with neglect of secular governance, and more critically, he died childless. This created a power vacuum and set the stage for a succession crisis. Upon Edward's death in early 1066, no clear heir remained. After nearly 7 centuries of shaping an identity through Anglo-Saxon and Viking influences, England stood at a decisive crossroads. And from that very vacuum of power, a storm would rise from across the Channel, one that would change the course of English history forever.